I'm going to start off here with our session of installing and configuring mobile devices. Our main objectives is going to be able to explain the value of connecting mobile devices to a network and describe the types of networks that are commonly used. Name the steps to installing and configuring a network connection, and then describe how to enable Bluetooth and pair a Bluetooth device to a mobile. Questions or doubts? This pertains to the A+ book, 643 through 674, for those that wish to look at the book also. Everyone on? I only have 7. All right, so let's continue here for Christina, help me out with the slide 4 here.
Mobile network connections overview. Mobile devices are radio transmitters/receivers that are technologically advanced. Cell phones use a baseband radio processor that is responsible for creating the wireless network interface and is used to handle the communication with the mobile provider. Mobile devices provide more robust functionality when connected to a network, especially if that network is the internet. 2 types of networks can be used to gain access to the internet: Wi-Fi network 802.11 standard, cell phone network, 4G long-term evolution, LTE technologies.
Thank you. Any questions on the overall mobile devices and the 2 types of networks? Obviously, now there's also the 5G. Doubts? Next slide, Justin.
Enabling, disabling Wi-Fi in a mobile device. In the settings of the device will be a section for Wi-Fi. In iPhone, it's called Wi-Fi. In Android, it's called wireless networks. When enabled, you will see all the Wi-Fi networks within range. To set up a connection, select one. If the connection requires a password, you will have to supply it. You also can pre-configure a wireless profile for commonly used service wireless networks, as well as those where the service set identifier SSID has been hidden.
Thank you. So under what circumstances would you tell someone to use a hotspot for network connection?
If they can't make a decent connection to a wireless network, or if there's no Wi-Fi around.
Well, yeah, that's, I mean, the hotspot would be some type of Wi-Fi, right? Now, but at the same time, so if, like you said, maybe they lost data connection, but let's say if they have data connection, why would we also recommend maybe to usually, not always, but depending on the provider, why would we recommend them to also connect to wireless network whenever possible?
To avoid data charges, sometimes you plan.
Exactly. We obviously have to be careful with what we're doing in these hotspots, but at the same time, some of these companies buy so much data that they can download per month. They don't get the full unlimited data. So we need to make sure that they're fully aware of what their provider has for them, or what we have purchased for them, and to remind them then if that is something that would become a problem, to obviously to connect to hotspots whenever possible, and not to use it without a VPN, most likely, right? If they're going to be connecting to back to the actual services of the company. Any questions or doubts on this slide about the enabling or disabling of Wi-Fi or the need of them? Next slide. Lázaro. Slide 6.
Enable / disable connections to a cellular network. Connection to a cellular network happens automatically as long as the phone has an active line SIM card with a cellular provider. To disable the automatic connections to the cell phone network, or if it somehow got turned off and needs to be turned back on, it can be done through the phone settings. One generic example of a step to access these settings is Settings, right arrow, wireless, right arrow, mobile, right arrow, enable data. Select or deselect this.
Thank you. So what I mean by that is going into settings, and when you hit the settings, the next menu would be wireless, the next menu would be mobile, and then the next setting would be enabling data. That's what you would see as choices. Now, overall, we've discussed different types of network connections that you may need when connecting mobile devices, but it would not be efficient or even possible, right, to go over every single possible mobile device that you might need to connect to these networks. There's just so many of them, and they keep on coming out. It's like if we've given birth to, I don't know what, it's just coming out like little rats. Every 2 or 3 months, there's a new one. So what would I need? What type of either behavioral skill or mindset would I require to be able to put up with the change? And obviously, depending on the situation, to connect these devices, to be able to basically meet the means of the change, the constant change. Anyone want to share out what would be the possible mindset or behavioral skill that I can use in reference to my change of approach as needed, depending on any given situation?
Would it be open mind and adaptation?
Adaptability, right? Need to be adaptable because there's a sheer number of mobile devices and a variety of network types. I need to be prepared and be an expert to move between devices with different features, operating platforms, accessories, etc. All of them have their own. As I stated, there's the Samsung pods, or forgive me because I don't know what their names are, and the iPods or whatever they're called, the ear things. There's so many different things. The watch, as we stated, that can be connected to these phones. So we got to be adaptable and obviously willing to learn, as I think you were saying there in reference to growth mindset, right? Any questions or doubts? Let's go on to slide 7. Obviously, all these devices use multiple features. We said hotspot, so nowadays you can actually provide hotspot to your iPad or any other technology device, right? You can tether. Tethering, anybody know what's the variance between the hotspot and tethering?
Isn't hotspot like making your phone a router basically, and then tethering is the process of actually getting that data? Well, in other words, using the internet for that device, using its device's internet to the host that it's giving it to.
So yeah, I guess that would be the most basic way we could say it, right? So hotspot would be that you use the mobile phone's data as your internet connection. Your obviously your mobile phone, as you said, it becomes a router, and then you use your Wi-Fi antenna to become an access point. So in essence, you become a SOHO portable router because you have an access point and you have the capability of, on the other side, you're using either your 4G or your 5G, whatever data that you have. That would be number one. Tethering will be using your Bluetooth or your USB cable to tether to connect to the 4G or to the 5G. That's where you tether. You either tether over Bluetooth or you tether off of USB to be able to connect out of that phone to the actual internet.
So hotspot is just like a cell phone router, except you're not using Bluetooth, you're not using a cable, and
You're using
tethering would be the
Wi-Fi.
opposite delivery, where it's going to be Bluetooth, which is its own single, and then a cable, any cable, right?
A USB cable that's connecting to your computer. Now, what people used to do for tethering was a way of circumventing, since when first unlimited, even before unlimited data, people were using their Bluetooth and or their USB to connect to their laptops to avoid obviously buying themselves those little hotspots or to buying the extra feature of the hotspot. So that was a way that they were circumventing the actual provider. Obviously, the provider was catching on because all of a sudden this phone, which was a BlackBerry, was surfing the internet much more than it was doing before, or any other one, Android, whatever it is. It was just getting pounded by data. They couldn't tell because it was coming in through their data network. They can't see the data of the USB. They can't see the data that's going on in the Bluetooth. They just know that all of a sudden this phone is just getting so much data is downloading. So people started receiving letters from AT&T and some of the providers saying, hey, we believe you're doing this. So if we catch you and we know that you are, you're going to get into either disconnected or we're going to charge you extra for using it as an actual hotspot that you're trying to circumvent. Airplane mode is that everyone knows airplane mode as that's available on laptops and any other ones. It basically shuts off everything data wise. There is no data, no Bluetooth, no wireless, and no phone data. There's no wireless connections at that point. Bluetooth is Bluetooth. Cellular updates is baseband radio firmware via PRI and PRL. And then we're going to be talking about the IMEIs and IMSIs, as I spoke about earlier. One has to do with the actual SIM card versus the other one is the actual unit. And lastly, your VPN. Next slide. Your hotspots. Overall, I'm pretty sure all of you guys are familiar with your hotspots. It's a mobile hotspot that lets you share your cellular data, as we just said. There's obviously downsides to that because of speed. It actually uses your phone as a router, and at times it may cost you money because you're using the cellular data, depending if you have unlimited or not. And obviously, there's no additional security beyond the password to connect. So if there's people that are able to get onto your actual thing and you've only created a very easy password, then obviously they're going to get in easier. And they're on your network. Mobile providers obviously sell small devices that only provide hotspots. So that there is those that allow you to then use that little hotspot character or device. It's not a phone, it's just a little wireless router to access point, to say at least, a little wireless SOHO router. Any questions?
Number 2?
Who? What?
The
When?
slide has a wrong title on it.
Which one? When? How? Where?
The one that says airplane mode.
Oh, okay, I see it. Thank you. I got
I just put
confused.
it to airplane
that.
mode here. I'm not sure which one you're in. Airplane mode. I don't think that's airplane mode. What is this?
It's tethering.
Tethering.
Yeah, I
Yes.
got confused looking at it. I thought it was.
That is
like,
tethering from the looks of it. If you see the USB cable. So when a device connects to a mobile hotspot to exchange resources like the internet, mobile device can be either Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or the physical connection using USB. So those are the 3 ways of creating a personal hotspot.
Wait, I'm a little bit confused.
These right here, I know it says airplane mode. Don't forget about the airplane mode, but this is a personal hotspot. Inside these things, you can actually, in this screen where it says personal hotspot, you can do it either through using the actual access point feature, or you could tether it with by pairing it with the Bluetooth or the USB.
So, okay, I got it confused. I thought hotspot meant you usually don't tether, but you actually are tethering with hotspot, right?
Can tether with hotspot.
Mm-hmm. You can tether with hotspot, yes.
Which could be Wi-Fi as well, because I thought Wi-Fi was exclusive to hotspot.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure why it says airplane mode. God only knows. Next one, airplane mode. A foreshadow to airplane mode. Here's the actual airplane mode itself. Obviously, that, as we stated before, that's been brought on, obviously, to facilitate the process and allow users to use the devices without actually using the data. This obviously is a must. It disables everything. Any questions? Next slide. Bluetooth. It's a short range, as we learned, is 802.15. Basically, the Android or the iOS has the menu functions where you can go and set up your actual, and depending on the manufacturer, they have their little way of getting there. And the iOS is pretty simple, settings, general. Bluetooth, a lot of times these things have also the little screen that you can just hit on the screen itself with the gesture, and it'll bring out the actual little button that you can turn on Bluetooth versus going through all these settings and going through the menus itself. Any questions or doubts? Slide 12. Obviously, in pairing itself, most of these things have their own proprietary way. Some of them ask you to actually put a password, so when you enable it, both of them have to have it on, and they'll both have to be able to see each other. And at times, it will ask you for a PIN code. It may be as simple as 000, or check the manual to make sure you know which is the code when you're connecting the devices to it. Any questions or doubts? Pretty sure all of you are familiar with this. I am not about to torture you with the steps of how to connect a Bluetooth device. If not, I am not sure what cave you've been in the last 20 years.
What?
What's Bluetooth? Huh? I only have white tooth. No, stop it. All right, here we go. Baseband radio. Who can help me out with this one? Brave souls.
All right. Cellular updates baseband radio firmware. The baseband or radio firmware, the description. It manages all wireless communications. The baseband radio processor has its own firmware and memory. Runs a real-time operating system so that everything happens as quickly as it can. Voice communication has to happen instantly, and we rely on this baseband radio processor to be able to send information back and forth as quickly as possible. Baseband radio firmware updates. Update process occurs OTA, over the air. The update remains back-end, never is usually seen by the end user. Update benefits, keeps the radio to date with the latest details.
Thank you. Yeah. Any questions on the radio firmware itself?
I got questions about TRL and T.
We're not there
No,
yet.
sorry.
But we will
That's-
be getting to that. Yes. You're talking about the list for connections, but that'll be coming up now.
Okay. And these updates are not using, like, for example, they're not using a generation. They're actually using the radio to get the data, right?
This is over-the-air radio firmware, yes. In the back end. Usually the user doesn't even see this. If the user sees any of this, it would be for maybe if it asks you at one point to restart it, but usually they don't. This is the radio firmware, not the actual iOS.
Oh, so this is like the self, like, for example, let's say your phone is Apple, but the actual device for talking to people is not going to be, it's separate, right? So the actual firmware for radio talking is getting updates
This
in
will
the
be
radio.
similar to being your BIOS.
Okay. And
Firmware,
it's getting,
think of always firmware being your BIOS,
okay.
right? That's what we learned. Firmware is or BIOS is a type of firmware. So they keep these baseband radios up to date over the air. Obviously, it is a great feature because now any security flaws or problems that these devices may have, they can with ease update them. Next slide. So basically, how does it do it? It downloads a zip file. This is for the Android. Copies it to the root of the phone. You turn off the phone, and then basically you start up the recovery mode, hold up the power. This is the manual way, I take it. Once you're back into the root, reboot the phone, it will start up and continue applying the update. Once this is completed, recovery menu will ask you the second time to reboot via home and double check. Any questions? Doubts? That would be the manual way of doing it. Obviously, OTA is the way to go. OTA, usually you could actually ask the provider, call the provider to send whatever it is that you need. You're not going to be wasting your time doing these things. Next slide. Am I on the right side? Yeah. Well, accessing radio firmware updates. After downloading desired firmware, connect the device to the computer via iTunes. Mac, hold down the Option key. Windows, hold down the Shift key. Click Update Restore button and select the IPSW file you recently downloaded and choose it. I'm pretty sure whoever has done a iPhone also, they know who the IPSW file is, or if they've ever messed up their phone or their iPad, they surely know who the IPSW file is. Any questions?
I don't know what the IPSW file is.
The IPSW is the firmware for your actual iPhone. So some people who try to hack the phone and jailbreak it will mess it up. So at one point, you're going to have to download an IPSW file if you're going to want to restore it. And it's asked by the actual iTunes. It's required for you to be able to restore it. If you ever got far down the rabbit hole, you're going to need that file. You should see my face when I didn't know where to get an IPSW file. I think we're coming up to Lazaro's favorite part of the story. Here we are. My PRIs, not to be mixed in with the ISDN PRIs. This is product release information. Go ahead, Lazaro, go ahead and read the slide for us, and then I guess we can answer your questions when you look at
Yes,
a PRI.
sir. Cellular updates. PRI. PRI, product release information. Description. Connection between the mobile device and the radio. It needs to be updated from time to time to add features or increase data speed. PRI, product release information updates. Update process occurs over the air. Updates is a flash process, and when done manually, the bootloader is used to perform a flash process and is done incorrectly. The process can become useless, bricked. Update benefits. May add features or increase data speed.
May add features, I think. I don't know why they put it twice. No. They put it twice. I'm not sure why they put may add
Okay.
features. All right, not a problem. So the PRI is basically the connection between the actual mobile device and the radio. So that's the part of the PRI that also happens over the air. If you try to do this manually, you do realize what brick means. You just brick the phone.
It's useless.
It's a brick. You could use it as a paper holder, or what you call it, the thing that you put on top paper. Is it paper holder, the one that you put on top paper? That's pretty much what it is. It's a brick. You could put it on top of a stack of paper.
Paperweight.
There we go. It's a paperweight. Thank you. My English not very good looking. Thank you, America. Any questions on this slide? What PRI is? It's the product release information, and it happens over the air in reference to the mobile device and the radio, how the communication happens. These type of updates, if the latest and greatest update happens for 5G or whatever it is that's going on between this phone and the radio, they send out the updates, not the firmware. This is the radio. Questions or doubts? PRI going to PRL. PRL, I'm pretty sure most of you, if you don't know it, you probably have asked for it. And if you haven't asked for it, you just know that you could actually fix it for yourself. PRL is actually the list of radio frequencies that are residing within the actual phone. So if I go from here and my phone is a world phone, I can actually call the provider and tell them to download the PRL list for France. I'm going to go to France. I need the PRL list for France. And then Verizon or Sprint will say, okay, not a problem. Here you go. As an example. I'm exaggerating. I don't know. Sure, Sprint or whoever it is has list, but you get the gist of it. It basically gives them the list of actual frequencies in that given area you're in. The PRL lists usually happen automatically. They obviously contain the baseband, the sub-baseband. It actually has the service provider's IDs, everything that phone needs to be able to connect with AT&T or Verizon or Sprint. Without this, it's not going to know. So then if it has an old PRL list, and you'll notice this, a lot of people don't know, if you all of a sudden you have a lot of bad connection and you're in a new area, but you just can't get a very good bars, go up to it. There's usually a way. Some of them is star 228 or some other type of dialing features to go into, and it gets you into this menu that actually allows you to update your PRL for you without having to talk to a person. Any questions on PRL, preferred roaming list?
Well, that if you go to a new area and you do that, when you go back, does it still have the old ones, or?
You might have to update. I don't know if it keeps the old one. If you're in a new area, it most likely refreshes compared to the area that you're in. You may have to do the same thing. Now, mind you, most of these things happen automatically. If you're having this problem, is where you manually go and ask for it. You can dial the actual number. To access PRL updates, as you see here, some of the phones actually have it under settings itself. Any questions or doubts? So the variance here is in the iOS. If we run a force and update of our profile, is one way of getting a new PRL. Questions, doubts? Next slide, slide 6, in reference to my IMEIs, IMESIs. The IMEI is a 15-digit serial number. Both of them are unique 15-digit number. Here on the IMEI is the International Mobile Equipment Identification, plain and simple, equipment. Who? The actual mobile provider will allow or disallow based on that IMEI if the phone can be on the network. So he can control this, lack of a better word, MAC address. If your phone is stolen and you let them know, they can actually, doesn't matter if they get a new IMESI, I'm sorry, IMSI, if they get a new SIM card, doesn't matter. If you give them the IMEI and tell them that you've lost this phone, that phone will not be able to get on that network. No matter what SIM card you put, it won't allow it because you've actually, the provider can actually block it. As for the International Mobile Subscriber Identification, the IMSI, is the 15-digit one used to identify the subscriber identification module itself, or the SIM card, which identifies the user and its network. So without one to the other, you're not going anywhere. So if I want to take my phone from Sprint to from Sprint to AT&T, I must provide AT&T the IMEI and my new IMSI that I have. So I gotta get a SIM card from AT&T to get it usually onto the AT&T network. Unless if somehow you get it released from the other provider. You also, sometimes these things are locked by the providers and they won't release the IMEI. Any questions on the IMEI or IMSI, the variants? Okay. Next slide, please. We have Hotspot. We have the capabilities of a VPN. We know it's a secure network over the internet. A cell phone can be an input of a VPN. Obviously, you need to have some sort of software that usually built into these units, or you can get from the actual store if it doesn't have it. When the connection of a phone through a VPN to a remote site, connection may be required. Digital configuration settings, such as the account details, the password, and or the secret information required to connect to that VPN. Any questions?
I got a question, but I'm not sure if it's related to the course. What is the difference from site to site to host, and host to host when it comes to VPN connection in the tunneling process?
Site is basically, it's a connection that's always on. There's two routers, a concentrator and another unit that's there that basically doesn't require a third-party software on the actual user. But when I connect to the actual LAN, the VPN concentrator or the VPN unit that's there will connect and has the connection on for me at all times over the internet.
So that's what site means. It means it's always available. It's more of a hardware kind of thing. Like it's actually dedicated.
Yeah, there's no password. I don't have to put a password. I don't have to do anything. It mimics, like if I had an MPLS circuit or a T1 circuit with a router, it mimics the exact same setup for the user. They don't need anything except for turn on the computer. That's it. It gets on the LAN, and then the VPN router routes them over the internet into the other site.
So, okay, I'm getting it a little bit better. So basically, a site is like a server in
Router
Central.
to router. Site to site is router to router. There's usually a device, a VPN concentrator or a router that is used to make the connection over the internet. No computer is required.
A site is literally a router, right? It's literally a router.
The site, yeah. In other words, one LAN to another LAN. So who connects LANs together? Routers.
Okay, that makes better sense to me.
Host to host is that from one host to another host. What's a host? A PC, right?
Oh, that makes sense.
Or a mobile device. That's a host.
In other words, the client, which is a host.
Host to
Anything can be
site
a
is a
host.
site that has a VPN concentrator, has that door there, but the host requires a ID and password to go in. So that side is always on, but then on host to host, both of them have to be ready to connect, right? Both of them have to turn on some type of connection. Where host to site, I just connect to the site and I can get in now. Like I go in through that door, through that router, to that VPN concentrator or VPN router using a software on my computer or my phone.
Okay, that actually explains a lot for me. Thank you.
Not a problem. Next slide. If no questions on that one, on slide 21, basically is just going and showing you how to establish a VPN connections. Pretty simple. You go into the settings, wireless networks, more VPN options, and it allows you to enter the informations like the .com or the IP addresses, whatever they're giving you, because obviously they're going to be giving you the information to this VPN that they're going to be connecting to. As I stated before, some things require an aftermarket application to be installed from the Google Store, or they call Google Store, Play Store, whatever you call that guy, iOS, depending which one you're coming from. Here's a screen of the iOS, similar, same thing, where you get to put the description, your server, your IDs and or IPs, depending what it is, the username and password. All these are in here. This is for the default ones that allow you to go in. There is ones, obviously, that Cisco and or other applications that you can install on these devices to allow you to go into those. But that all depends on how the company is set up with their VPNs. Any questions or doubts? This pretty much ends this here. And unless if there's no other questions, allow everyone to enjoy their